Hello, friends, and welcome back to the Brockopp side. Spider-Man Far From Home was once again directed by John Watts, and this takes place after the events of Avengers Endgame, where everybody that was dusted came back 5 years later, although they haven't aged 5 years at all, so they kind of lost a good 5 years of their lives. The entire world is mourning the loss of Iron Man, including Peter Parker, who is now facing the dilemma that, hey, there's gonna need to be a next Iron Man at some point, and I'm not really sure that's gonna be me, so he just kinda wants to forget about all that, go on this great European trip with his classmates, especially with the girl he likes, MJ. But then, of course, the whole thing gets hijacked by Nick Fury, who's like, hey, Spider-Man, we need your help to defeat some elemental monsters, not the ones from Crash Bandicoot 4, but these ones, and oh yeah, this is Mysterio, played by Jake Gyllenhaal. So, standing in line for 3.5 hours last night led me to see Spider-Man Far From Home a week early, which I was really excited about. Definitely expectations were through the roof with this one. You know, Homecoming was a really good Spider-Man movie. I liked it more than some did, but it's like, there was definitely a lot of room for improvement and just things that could be done a lot better in that movie. And I think here with Far From Home, without getting into gory detail right off the bat, Far From Home definitely is better than Homecoming. It takes what was good about that, elevates it, and takes some of the issues you might have and improves upon them. And this is probably by far one of the best Spider-Man movies we've ever gotten, right next to Spider-Man 2 and Spider-Man Into the Spider-Verse. Yeah, that good. Once again, Tom Holland was great as Peter Parker / Spider-Man. I've been a big fan of Tom Holland ever since he was introduced in Civil War, and I really like seeing this character progress throughout these movies. You know, this is only his second solo movie, but it's like the 4th or 5th time he's been in the MCU. You know, in the first movie, Peter was just this young, anxious kid who was just in a big rush to become one of the big leagues and prove himself to be like amongst the other Avengers. And now here, after the events of Infinity War and Endgame, he's kinda taken a step back and thought, okay, maybe I'm not quite cut out for this yet. Maybe I need to just stay close to the ground and just try not to do anything too crazy, which I know some people are probably going to give him crap for, because it's like, okay, you're Spider-Man, you're a superhero, you're not going to take your suit with you to on your school trip in case you need it. Well, it's like, yeah, well, I think after, dying at the end of Infinity War and then being brought back only for Iron Man, his freaking mentor, to die, I feel like that would probably humble you a little bit like that. And also, I mean, he's not the first Spider-Man to kind of not really want to have to be Spider-Man all the time. I mean, Tobey Maguire did the exact same thing in Spider-Man 2, where just the pressures and the stress of being Spider-Man got to him to the point that he had to quit for a while. So I think it's fine, and I really think it just shows how the character has grown since Homecoming. Jake Gyllenhaal was fantastic as Mysterio. He was a villain I didn't actually think we were ever going to get in live action form. I even kind of jokingly mentioned that in my Spider-Man Homecoming review. You know, I'd really like to see Mysterio show up in a movie, but I feel like they'll just throw him out the window too, so... Which I actually just realized I kind of accidentally predicted he was going to be in this movie with that. But, I mean, the suit looks fantastic, fishbowl and all, with the little eye pieces and the cape. It just looks really, really good. But, looks aren't everything, but Jake Gyllenhaal gives a great performance as Mysterio. I can't get into too much detail about, like, his motivation and his plan stuff, because, once again, big spoilers, but I really liked him in this movie, and it's kind of weird because he was like that close to being replaced as Peter Parker in Spider-Man 2, and there were moments in the movie where I could see that he was kind of channeling Louis Bloom from Nightcrawler, his character from Nightcrawler, in a few different moments, so I thought that was just the perfect thing you had to do for that particular scene, so that was a really nice touch on his part. And of course, Mysterio has some really good chemistry with Peter Parker, which is one of the strongest things about this movie and a lot of other Spider-Man movies, is Peter's relationships with the different characters. He sees Mysterio as this guy that's like a fellow hero from another Earth that can relate to what he's going through because he's, quote-unquote a superhero. But, it doesn't really stop there because, we get to see, Ned and Peter interact, with their best friend handshake and their chemistry and all that. It's fun to see him interact with Happy Hogan again and Aunt May. And also, we get to see the love story between him and MJ progress since the first movie. there wasn't really a love story there, but this time it's definitely like that. But what I really like about the love story this time around is that it feels realistic. You know, these are two just really awkward people just trying to figure shit out, which is something I actually can relate to, you know. So their romantic progression wasn't weirdly romanticized, no pun intended. You know, it just kind of felt like something that could actually happen in real life. You know, minus the superpowers and the monsters and all that, but you know what I mean. And we also get to see how the world reacted to Thanos' snap, and you know what it was like for a bunch of people to randomly disappear and then suddenly just come back 5 years later. It was really fun to see that from like the high school level, because at the beginning you see this footage of somebody like at a pep rally, and then people just dust away, and people are like, oh my god, what's happening? And then it cuts to footage of like another pep rally 5 years later where people just randomly come back like, what the hell? And of course, it is a movie set in the MCU, so it is a very hilarious movie, and a lot of the humor does come from Peter's relationships with all these different people. You know, that's where a lot of the humor and just a lot of the enjoyment comes out of, but that's kind of one of the important things of telling a good Spider-Man story, is having those lighthearted, humorous, kind of quippy moments. The action and the visuals are fantastic throughout this movie, especially in the second half. You know, like I mentioned at the beginning of the video, everything you liked about Homecoming is elevated, and some of the issues that probably a lot of people had, myself included, with Homecoming were improved upon. You know, it's like, you know, the villain doesn't have enough big stakes? Boom! Fixed. Didn't see Spider-Man swing through New York City? Boom! Fixed. Some other things related to the Spider-Man universe that we've gotten possibly before, but I'm not going to get into detail here because I don't want to ruin the experience for you. Boom! Got it! And I think this movie does the intelligent thing of slowly leading you into this grander scale Spider-Man movie, because the first half is very much like Homecoming, you know, with these high school kids, you know, interacting, joking, having a good time, dealing with their high school problems, and then probably by the time this one particular scene with Mysterio and Spider-Man, again, not gonna get into too much detail, but when that scene hit, the rest of the movie was just way uphill from there, and it just became this larger scale Spider-Man movie that I think a lot of people have been wanting to see, you know, for many, many years now. So it's like, you kind of have to be a little patient, so if you weren't the hugest fan of Homecoming, you're gonna have to deal with some of that kind of stuff through a bit of it, but then once it gets to this one moment, it's just gonna be like, yes, this is a Spider-Man movie, this is what I wanted. Thank you. Michael Giacchino also came back to compose the soundtrack for this movie like he did for Homecoming, and I really liked what he did with the Homecoming soundtrack there, and his, you know, his Spider-Man theme, which, you know, is not quite as memorable as Danny Elfman's or the PS4 Spider-Man, but I still really like it, and I really like how it's progressed in this movie. You know, it has more of a heroic scale, and the soundtrack as a whole just feels a lot more distinct this time around, especially with Mysterio's theme with these cool synth vibes and stuff. So as you could probably tell, I was absolutely floored by this movie, but I do have some problems with it. But I think pretty much for the most part, my problems with this movie just kind of fall in the realm of nitpicking and things that only really will bother myself. So a little under halfway through the movie, Peter makes a certain decision which kind of incites a few incidents where it's kind of what had to happen to make certain things in the story progress, but it'll just kind of probably make you look at the screen and go, really? You really made a decision that stupid? Are you kidding me? But I also tried to kind of push myself back a little bit and be like, okay, hang on. He's just a teenager, he's still a kid, he's a flawed character. That's one of the beautiful things about Peter Parker, is that he's a flawed character. He doesn't always make the right decision. But this particular decision, it's like, yeah, that was kinda stupid on your part, Peter. And there are a couple things revealed about Mysterio's character and his motivations, and without getting into too much detail, I feel like I've said that a million times in this video, but really, without getting into too much detail, some of it feels just a little repetitive of some other things we've seen from other Spider-Man villains. Michael Giacchino's fantastic orchestral cover of the 60s Spider-Man theme song was not present here when the Marvel logo opened, which that really bummed me out because I really liked that in Homecoming, and I was really hoping that was going to be like a staple of the MCU Spider-Man films, so I was really bummed I didn't get to hear that in the theater with surround sound, the big screen and all that. But I understand why they didn't do it and what they had in placement of it, which led to the first scene of the movie. It's like, yeah, that I understand, and I guess it works, but still, it's just like, it's just kind of one of those things that does bum me out a little bit. And as far as my problems go, probably the biggest one, which it doesn't ruin the movie for me or anything, it's something that I pretty much have gotten over already, is seeing Aunt May and Peter's relationship progress, knowing that Aunt May knows that Peter is Spider-Man. You know, I think I did touch on this a little bit in my Homecoming review, where, you know, I was kind of disappointed that Aunt May just kind of randomly found out Peter was Spider-Man at the last frame of the movie and then it cut to the credits, because that's something I've wanted to see happen on the big screen since I was a child, seeing Aunt May find out, have to deal with the fact that her nephew is putting on a bright spandex suit and fighting crime, and then slowly coming to terms with that and realizing what he's doing is a good thing, and her being proud of him. You know, in this movie, she is super supportive of Peter and his Spider-Man-ing, and, you know, even tries to make sure he packs his suit and helps him out with, like, charity events and stuff, which I think is great, seeing Aunt May kind of not try to safeguard him like a small child and treat him like a person and realize he can handle himself, he's Spider-Man, he's a hero. But, you know, I really wish we could have seen that happen. You know, I feel like they could have put that more into Homecoming, you know, where Aunt May finds out maybe, like, halfway through that movie, and then she slowly starts to get into the idea that, hey, what you're doing is great, and then we come into this movie and she's 100% supportive. So that's just kind of one of my issues as far as a big Spider-Man fan goes. So, but like I said, it's not something that's like keeping me from enjoying this movie or anything, because we do get to see Aunt May, you know, being supportive of Peter, and I think that's great. You know, we got to see a little bit of that in Spider-Man of the Spider-Verse, where, you know, Aunt May had the storage shed under the house and all that, and we even got to see some of that in the PS4 Spider-Man game. Even though that wasn't until the very end, and then Aunt May died. And then she died. I'm not crying, you're crying. There is just so much more I want to talk about with this movie, like the post-credit scenes, plenty of in-depth detail about certain story elements, but I just can't do it here because it goes so deeply into spoiler town. I can't talk about that stuff a week before the movie comes out, and I just really can't wait to talk about certain things about this movie that made me giddy like a school child. But for right now, so all in all, Spider-Man Far From Home was fantastic, one of the best Spider-Man movies ever, and I think as far as Spider-Man movies in the MCU goes, the future looks bright. You know, as long as Sony doesn't, you know, forcibly shoehorn Venom into this movie like they did with Spider-Man 3, because we all know how well that turned out. So, those are my thoughts on Spider-Man Far From Home. If you guys have seen this movie, or, you know, in a week from now when it's actually out in theaters, or if you can't wait for the possibility of seeing a live-action Spider-Verse movie with Toby and Andrew and Tom all together, and maybe including a little Spider-Ham thrown in there, let me know it's down below, and we'll see you on the Brockopp side.